The words hung in the air between them like smoke from a dying fire. Your children call me Pa now. Eliza Mercer stood at the wash basin, her hands submerged in cold water, a plate frozen in her grip. She didn't turn around. Couldn't. The world had narrowed to the sound of his voice, low, steady, deliberate, and the terrible weight of what he just said. Behind her, James Calloway stood in the doorway of the small cabin, hat in hand, backlit by the late afternoon sun. He'd been working on the fence all day, his shirt soaked through with sweat, his hands raw from wire and wood. He'd come in for water. But he'd stayed to say this. Eliza's breath caught in her chest. What did you say? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. You heard me. She set the plate down carefully, her fingers trembling. Then she turned. James hadn't moved. He stood there like he always did, quiet, unshakable, a man carved from the same hard earth he worked. His face was weathered and lined, the kind of face that belonged to someone who'd lived more than one life. His eyes, though, those were soft. Too soft for a man like him. They don't, Eliza said, shaking her head. They wouldn't. They do. You're lying. I'm not. Eliza's hands balled into fists at her sides. Why would you say that to me? James stepped into the cabin, closing the door behind him. The space felt smaller with him in it. He always made everything feel smaller. Because it's true, he said. And because you need to hear it. I don't. Her voice broke. She turned back to the basin, gripping the edge of the counter. I don't need to hear anything from you. Eliza. Don't. But he didn't stop. He never did. Samuel asked me this morning if I was staying, James said quietly. Asked if I was gonna be here when he woke up tomorrow. And when I said yes, he smiled. First time I've seen that boy smile in 6 months. Eliza squeezed her eyes shut. She could see Samuel in her mind, her eldest, only 9 years old, with his father's dark hair and serious eyes. The boy who'd stopped smiling the day they buried his pa. And Lily? James continued. She brought me a flower yesterday. A wild flower she picked out by the creek. Said it was for me because I fixed her doll. Stop. And Rose, stop. Eliza whirled around, her eyes blazing. You think I don't know what my children are doing? You think I don't see the way they look at you? The way they follow you around like you're... She couldn't finish the sentence. James waited. When she didn't continue, he did. Like I'm their father. The words hit her like a fist to the chest. You're not, she whispered. You're not their father. I know that. Then why are you saying this? James set his hat on the table and crossed the small room until he stood just a few feet from her. Close enough that she could see the dust on his shirt, the lines around his eyes, the way his jaw tightened when he was holding something back. Because you're pretending it's not happening, he said. You're pretending that if you don't say it out loud, it'll just go away. But it won't, Eliza. It's already here. She shook her head, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. You don't understand. Then help me understand. I can't. Her voice cracked. I can't let them forget him. James's expression softened. They won't forget. They will. If they start calling you. She couldn't even say the word. If they start thinking of you as their father, then Robert will just be a name. A memory that fades. And I can't let that happen. I won't. James was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called. Robert's been gone 8 months, James said finally. And in that time, I've watched you break your back trying to hold this place together. Watched you go hungry so your children could eat. Watched you cry yourself to sleep every night thinking no one could hear. Eliza's breath hitched. I'm not trying to replace him, James continued, his voice low and steady. I'm trying to help you survive. That's all I've ever been trying to do. Why? The word came out sharp, accusing. Why do you care? You didn't even know us before he died. James finished. I know. So why? Why are you still here? James met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw something flicker there, something raw and unguarded. Because I made him a promise. Eliza froze. What? James exhaled slowly, like he was letting go of something he'd been carrying for too long. The day Robert got sick, he said. I was passing through town. We got to talking at the saloon. He told me about his family. About his wife and his 3 kids. Told me he had a ranch he was building from nothing. Said he was gonna make something of it. Something his children could be proud of. Eliza's hands shook. 2 days later, I heard he'd taken a fever. By the time I got to the doc's office, he was dying. And he knew it. No. Eliza's voice was barely a whisper. He asked me to look after you, James said. Asked me to make sure you and the kids were safe. Said he didn't have anyone else to ask. Tears spilled down Eliza's cheeks. I didn't know you, James continued. Didn't know him, really. But I looked into his eyes, and I saw a man who was terrified of leaving his family alone in this world. So I said yes. I promised him I'd stay. And I have. Eliza turned away, pressing her hands to her face. Her shoulders shook. James didn't move. He just stood there, giving her space to break. They call you Pa, she whispered after a long moment. Because you're the one who's here. Because you're the one who tucks them in at night and teaches Samuel how to ride and fixes Lily's dolls and carries Rose on your shoulders. You're the one they see. Not him. That doesn't mean they've forgotten him. It means they're moving on. Her voice cracked. And I don't know if I can. James took a step closer. You don't have to move on, Eliza. You just have to keep living. She looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen. What if I don't know how? James held her gaze. Then let me show you. For a moment, the world was silent. Then the sound of hoofbeats shattered the stillness. Eliza's head snapped toward the window. James was already moving, his hand going to the revolver at his hip. Stay inside, he said. But Eliza followed him to the door. Outside, 3 riders were approaching the cabin, moving slow and deliberate through the fading light. They wore dusters and wide-brimmed hats, their faces shadowed. One of them carried a rifle across his saddle. James stepped out onto the porch, his hand resting on his gun. Can I help you? He called. The lead rider reined his horse to a stop 20 yards from the cabin. He was a tall man with a scar running down the left side of his face. We're looking for James Calloway, the man said. Eliza's blood ran cold. James didn't move. You found him. The scarred man smiled. Good. We've been looking for you a long time. James didn't take his eyes off the riders. I don't know you, he said evenly. The scarred man's smile widened. No. But you knew my brother. Eliza felt her stomach drop. Behind her, she heard the soft creak of the cabin door. She turned and saw Samuel standing in the doorway, his eyes wide. Go back inside, she whispered urgently. But Ma, now. Samuel hesitated, then retreated into the cabin. Eliza pulled the door half closed behind him, but she didn't go inside. She stayed on the porch, her heart hammering in her chest. James took a slow step forward, his hand still resting on his gun. I've known a lot of men. You're gonna have to be more specific. Tom Bridger, the scarred man said. Dodge City. 3 years ago. James's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. You killed him, the man continued. Shot him in the street like a dog. He drew first. That's not how his family sees it. I don't care how his family sees it, James said, his voice cold. It was a fair fight. The law said so. The law. The scarred man spat into the dirt. The law don't mean nothing out here. What means something is blood. And you owe us blood, Calloway. Eliza's hands trembled. She looked at James, her mind racing. She'd known he had a past, everyone out here did. But she'd never asked. Never wanted to know. Now she wished she had. You want revenge? James said. Fine. But not here. Not with a woman and children watching. The scarred man glanced at Eliza, then back at James. That your family? James didn't answer. Didn't think you were the settling type, the man said. But I guess everyone gets soft eventually. Leave them out of this. Can't do that. The scarred man shifted in his saddle. See, we came a long way to find you. And we're not leaving without what we came for. Then you'll have to go through me. That's the plan. The two men flanking the scarred rider moved their hands toward their guns. Eliza's breath caught. Wait! She shouted, stepping forward. James turned sharply. Eliza, get back inside. No. She moved to stand beside him, her voice shaking but firm. You can't do this here. Not in front of my children. The scarred man tilted his head. She's got fire. I like that. You don't touch her, James said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. Then come with us. We'll settle this away from here. Just you and me. And your two friends? The scarred man shrugged. They're just here to make sure you don't run. James was silent for a long moment. Eliza could see the calculation in his eyes, the way he was weighing options, measuring distances. She'd seen that look before, on her husband's face the day he tried to chase off a pack of wolves threatening the livestock. The look of a man preparing to die. No, she said quietly. James glanced at her. Eliza, you're not going with them. I don't have a choice. Yes, you do. She turned to face him fully, her voice low and urgent. You stay here. You let them come. And we fight. James's eyes widened. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. You promised Robert you'd protect us. Well, you can't do that if you're dead. And I can't do it if they burn this cabin down with you inside. Then we leave. Tonight. We pack what we can and we go. They'll follow. Then we keep moving. James shook his head. That's no life for your children. It's better than watching you die for a fight that isn't yours anymore. It's always been mine. James's voice was heavy. I killed his brother. That makes it mine. You didn't start it. Doesn't matter. It ends with me. One way or another. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. You're just like him. Just like Robert. Always ready to throw yourself away for some stupid idea of honor. James flinched. He died trying to protect us too. Eliza continued, her voice breaking. Rode out in a storm to check on the livestock. Caught fever and never came back. And for what? So we could keep a few more cows. So we could pretend we were safe out here. Eliza. I won't watch you do the same thing. She grabbed his arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve. I won't let you walk away from us. Not like this. James stared at her, something unreadable flickering across his face. On the horses, the scarred man cleared his throat. This is real touching and all, but we don't have all day. What's it gonna be, Calloway? James didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on Eliza. If I stay, he said quietly, they'll come anyway. Tonight. Tomorrow. Next week. They won't stop until they get what they came for. Then let them come, Eliza said fiercely. But you're not facing them alone. You don't know how to fight. Then teach me. James's expression softened. For a moment, he looked like he wanted to say something important. But the moment passed. He turned back to the riders. You've got until sundown to get off my land, he said. The scarred man's smile vanished. Your land? That's right. You think you can take all three of us? I know I can. The scarred man studied him for a long moment. Then he laughed, a cold, humorless sound. All right, Calloway. We'll play it your way. But when the sun goes down, we're coming. And we're not leaving until you're dead. He wheeled his horse around, and the other two followed. They rode slowly back toward the ridge, their silhouettes dark against the fading light. Eliza watched them go, her heart pounding. What have you done? She whispered. James didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at the horizon, his hands still resting on his gun. Inside the cabin, Samuel appeared in the doorway again. "Pa," he said quietly. "Are they coming back?" James turned, and Eliza saw the way his expression shifted, softening, breaking just slightly. "Yeah," he said. "They're coming back. Are you scared?" James crouched down so he was level with the boy. "A little." "What are we gonna do?" James looked up at Eliza. She held his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "We're gonna fight," James said. The sun touched the horizon, bleeding red across the desert. James moved through the cabin like a man preparing for war. He checked his revolver, loaded his rifle, and stacked boxes of ammunition on the table. Eliza watched him work, her mind numb with fear and something else, something she didn't have a name for yet. "Get the children into the back room," James said without looking up. "Bar the door from the inside. Don't come out until I tell you it's safe." "What if you can't tell me?" Eliza's voice was barely a whisper. James paused. Then he crossed the room and placed his hands on her shoulders. "If something happens to me," he said, "you take the kids and you run. You don't look back. You don't stop. You ride until you reach the next town, and you find the marshal. His name's Bill Garrett. Tell him what happened. He'll protect you. James, promise me." Eliza's eyes burned. "I can't." "Promise me, Eliza." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I promise." James held her gaze for a moment longer, then turned back to the table. Eliza gathered the children, Samuel, Lily, and little Rose, and ushered them into the back room. She gave them each a blanket and told them to be quiet, no matter what they heard. "Is Pa gonna be okay?" Lily whispered, her small hand clutching Eliza's sleeve. Eliza's throat tightened. She opened her mouth to correct her daughter, to say he's not your pa, but the words wouldn't come. "He'll be fine," she said instead. "Just stay here. Stay quiet." She closed the door and slid the wooden bar into place. Then she returned to the main room. James was standing by the window, his rifle in hand, watching the darkening landscape. "They're out there," he said quietly. "I can feel them." Eliza picked up the shotgun Robert had kept by the door. She'd never fired it. Didn't know if she could. But she held it anyway, her hands shaking. "I told you to stay with the children," James said. "And I told you I'm not letting you do this alone." James turned to look at her. In the dim light, his face was shadowed, unreadable. "You're a stubborn woman," he said. "I learned from the best." Despite everything, James smiled. "Robert would have liked you saying that. He would have liked you too," Eliza said. "If he'd had the chance to know you." James's smile faded. "Maybe." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken things hanging heavy between them. Then the first gunshot shattered the night. The bullet punched through the window, spraying glass across the floor. Eliza screamed and dropped to the ground. James fired back, the rifle's report deafening in the small space. "Stay down!" he shouted. More shots came, rapid, chaotic, from multiple directions. James moved to the other window and fired again, his movements precise and controlled. Eliza crawled toward the table and crouched behind it, her heart hammering. She could hear the children crying in the back room, and it took everything she had not to run to them. "How many?" she shouted over the gunfire. "3," James called back. "Maybe 4. I thought there were only 3. They brought friends." A bullet hit the doorframe, splintering wood. Another smashed through the opposite window. James reloaded and fired twice more. Someone outside screamed. "Got one," he said. But the shooting didn't stop. If anything, it intensified. Eliza raised the shotgun and aimed it toward the broken window. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it steady. "Eliza, don't!" She pulled the trigger. The shotgun kicked hard, slamming into her shoulder and knocking her backward. The blast was enormous, echoing through the cabin like thunder. She didn't know if she'd hit anything, but for a moment, the shooting outside stopped. James stared at her. Did you just, yes? Eliza, shut up and keep shooting. Despite himself, James laughed, a short, breathless sound. Then he turned back to the window and fired again. The battle raged on. Minutes felt like hours. Eliza reloaded the shotgun with trembling hands and fired twice more, the recoil bruising her shoulder each time. James moved between windows, his shots calculated and precise. Finally, the gunfire outside began to slow. Then it stopped altogether. Eliza held her breath, listening. Outside, she could hear voices, low, urgent, arguing. Then the sound of hoofbeats. James moved to the door and peered through a gap in the wood. They're leaving. All of them? Yeah. He sounded surprised. All of them. Eliza let out a shaky breath and set the shotgun down. Her entire body was trembling. James lowered his rifle and turned to face her. His shirt was torn, and there was blood on his arm. Whether his or someone else's, she couldn't tell. You hit one of them, he said. I did. Square in the chest. He went down hard. Eliza's stomach turned. Is he dead? I don't know. But he's not getting up. She pressed her hands to her face, trying to steady her breathing. I know. I didn't think I could. You did what you had to do. James crossed the room and placed a hand on her shoulder. You saved us, Eliza. You and that shotgun. She looked up at him, her eyes wet. They'll come back, won't they? James hesitated. Maybe. What do we do? We keep fighting. Eliza shook her head. I can't do this again. I can't. The sound of a child crying cut her off. She turned and ran to the back room, sliding the bar aside and pulling the door open. The children were huddled together in the corner, their faces pale and tear-streaked. Mama! Lily sobbed, running into her arms. Eliza held her tight, her own tears falling freely now. Samuel and Rose clung to her sides, and she gathered all three of them close, whispering reassurances she didn't believe. Behind her, James stood in the doorway, his rifle still in hand. It's over, he said quietly. For now. But as Eliza held her children and listened to the wind howl outside, she knew it wasn't over. Not even close. The cabin was silent except for the soft crackle of the fire James had built in the stove. Eliza sat on the floor with the children, Rose curled in her lap, Lily pressed against her side, and Samuel leaning against her shoulder. None of them spoke. They just sat together in the flickering firelight, breathing. James stood by the window, keeping watch. His arm was bandaged now. Eliza had wrapped it while the children slept, and his rifle rested against the wall within reach. He hadn't said much since the shooting stopped. Neither had she. After a long while, Samuel stirred. Pa? He said quietly. James turned. Yeah? Are they gonna come back? James was quiet for a moment. Then he crossed the room and sat down on the floor beside them, his back against the wall. I don't know, he said honestly. Maybe. What if they do? Then we'll be ready. Samuel looked down at his hands. I was scared. Me too. The boy's head snapped up. Really? Really? James's voice was gentle. Being scared doesn't make you weak, Samuel. It makes you human. But you still fought. Yeah. Because sometimes you have to. Samuel thought about this for a long moment. Then he leaned forward and wrapped his small arms around James's neck. James stiffened, surprised. Then, slowly, he raised his arms and hugged the boy back. Eliza watched, her throat tight. Thank you for protecting us, Samuel whispered. James's eyes closed. You don't have to thank me. But I want to. When Samuel pulled back, he was smiling, small and tentative, but real. Lily stirred next, lifting her head from Eliza's side. Pa? She said. Yeah, sweetheart? Can you tell us a story? James blinked. A story? Mama used to tell us stories, Lily said. But she doesn't anymore. She's too sad. Eliza's breath hitched. James glanced at her, then back at Lily. What kind of story? A happy one. James was quiet for a moment. Then he shifted, settling himself more comfortably against the wall. All right, he said. Let me think. The children waited, their eyes fixed on him. When I was about your age, James began, I lived on a ranch with my father. It was a small place, nothing fancy. Just us and a few horses. One day, a wild Mustang wandered onto our property. Beautiful animal, black as night, with a white star on its forehead. Lily's eyes went wide. Did you catch it? Not at first. That horse was faster than anything I'd ever seen. But my father said if I wanted it, I had to earn it. So every day for a month, I went out to the field where the Mustang grazed, and I just sat there. Didn't try to catch it. Didn't chase it. Just Saturday. Why? Samuel asked. Because I wanted it to trust me. And trust takes time. Did it work? James smiled. Eventually. One day, the Mustang walked right up to me. Let me touch its nose. And from that day on, it followed me everywhere. Became the best horse I ever had. What happened to it? Lily asked. James's smile faded. I had to let it go. When I left home. Why'd you leave? Because sometimes you have to leave the things you love to find where you belong. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. And did you? Samuel asked. Find where you belong? James looked at Eliza. Then at the children. Then back at the fire. Yeah, he said quietly. I think I did. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Rose stirred in Eliza's lap. The little girl, barely 3 years old, lifted her head and looked at James with sleepy eyes. Pa, she murmured. James's breath caught. Rose reached out her small hand toward him. James hesitated, then took it, his large, callous fingers wrapping gently around hers. I love you, Rose whispered. James's eyes glistened. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Eliza watched him struggle, watched him try to hold himself together. It's okay, she said softly. You can say it back. James looked at her, his expression raw and unguarded. I love you too, he whispered to Rose. The little girl smiled and closed her eyes, drifting back to sleep. James sat there, holding her hand, his face turned away so the children wouldn't see the tears streaming down his cheeks. Eliza reached out and placed her hand on his. He didn't pull away. They sat like that for a long time, together in the firelight, the children between them, the night pressing close outside. And for the first time since Robert died, Eliza felt something other than grief. She felt hope. Morning came cold and clear. James was already awake when Eliza opened her eyes, standing by the window with his rifle, scanning the horizon. The children were still asleep, tangled together on the floor where they'd finally collapsed from exhaustion. Eliza rose quietly and joined him. Anything? She asked. James shook his head. Nothing. But that doesn't mean they're gone. What do? We wait. And we prepare. Eliza looked out at the land, her land, the ranch Robert had died trying to build. It looked fragile in the morning light, small and vulnerable against the endless stretch of desert. I can't live like this, she said quietly. Always waiting. Always afraid. I know. We have to end it. James turned to look at her. How? You go to them. You finish it. Eliza, not alone. She met his eyes. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. James, I won't let you. You don't get to decide. Her voice rose sharp and fierce. This is my home. My family. My fight. You don't get to shut me out. James stared at her, his jaw tight. If you go alone, Eliza continued, they'll kill you. But if we go together, if we face them together, maybe we have a chance. And the children? We take them to the neighbor's ranch. The Harrisons. They'll keep them safe. James was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right. 2 hours later, they rode out. The children were safe at the Harrison Ranch, confused and frightened but surrounded by people who would protect them. Eliza had held each of them close before leaving, whispering promises she hoped she could keep. Now she and James rode side by side, her shotgun across her saddle, his rifle in hand. They found the men camped at the base of the ridge, just where James knew they'd be. The scarred man stood as they approached, his hand moving toward his gun. Come to die, Calloway? He called. Come to settle this. James called back. Once and for all. The scarred man laughed. You brought your woman. How sweet. Leave her out of this. Can't do that. She's part of it now. James and Eliza dismounted. They stood side by side, 20 yards from the 3 remaining men. Here's how this works, James said. You and me. Fair fight. You win, you walk away. I win, you leave this territory and never come back. The scarred man considered this. And if I say no? Then we all die here. The man's smile faded. He looked at his companions, then back at James. Fine, he said. But just you and me. She stays out of it. James nodded. He handed his rifle to Eliza, then turned to face the scarred man. They stood in silence, the wind whistling between them. Then, faster than Eliza could follow, both men drew. 2 shots rang out, echoing across the desert. For a moment, no one moved. Then the scarred man staggered backward, clutching his chest. He looked down at the blood spreading across his shirt, then up at James, his eyes wide with disbelief. How? He collapsed. James stood there, his smoking revolver still raised, a line of blood running down his side where the other man's bullet had grazed him. The 2 remaining men stared in shock. It's over, James said. Take him and go. They didn't argue. They loaded the scarred man's body onto his horse and rode away without looking back. Eliza ran to James, her hands shaking. You're hurt, I'm fine. He holstered his gun and pulled her close. It's over. She buried her face in his chest and sobbed, deep, wrenching sobs that tore through her entire body. James held her, his hand stroking her hair. It's over, he whispered again. The ranch had grown. James had built a new fence, repaired the barn, and added a second room to the cabin. The children had a proper place to sleep now, and Eliza had a kitchen that didn't leak when it rained. Samuel was learning to ride. Lily had started teaching Rose her letters. And every night they sat together at the table James had built and ate dinner as a family. Eliza stood in the doorway one evening, watching James teach Samuel how to rope a fence post. The boy laughed as he missed for the 3rd time, and James ruffled his hair, smiling. Again, James said. You'll get it. Samuel tried again. This time, the rope caught. I did it! Samuel shouted. Pa, I did it! James grinned. I told you would. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. Later that night, after the children were asleep, she and James sat on the porch, watching the stars. They really do call you Pa, Eliza said quietly. Yeah. James's voice was soft. I know. Does it bother you? No. He looked at her. Does it bother you? Eliza thought about Robert, his face, his voice, the way he used to hold her. She thought about the grief that had nearly consumed her, and the fear that had kept her from living. And she thought about the man sitting beside her, the man who'd kept his promise, who'd stayed when he could have left, who'd fought for her family like it was his own. No, she said. It doesn't bother me. James reached for her hand. She let him take it. I loved him, Eliza said. I loved Robert. And I'll never forget him. I know. But I think. She paused, searching for the words. I think I could love you too. If you'd let me. James turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. I'd like that, he said quietly. Eliza smiled, a real smile, the first in nearly a year. James leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met, soft and tentative, a promise sealed in the quiet of the desert night. When they pulled apart, Eliza rested her head on his shoulder. "Your children call you Pa," she whispered. "And I think I'd like to call you my husband." James's arm tightened around her. "I'd like that too," he said. They sat there together under the stars, the ranch stretching out around them, alive, growing, full of possibility. And in the distance, a coyote called to the moon, its voice carrying across the desert like a benediction.